Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic. Let's do it. People who have had a classmate die. What happened? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. The family left a candle on during the night, and it set fire to the house. The dad and the brother got out, but the daughter and the mother were found holding each other on the bed. It was primary school, and she was one of my best friends. I was devastated and think of her often. Committed suicide with rat poison in the 5th grade. The friend has had multiple medical conditions since he was a baby. He's very overweight, had trouble speaking, and his eyes were very weak. The doctors had given him a maximum of 3 to 4 more years until he became blind. Even in class, he had to wear thick glasses and basically stick to the page to see the words clearly enough to read. He used to be pretty depressed about the eventuality of losing his eyesight in a few years. We used to try and include him in sports as much as we could, but his weight and weak eyesight made it tough for him to play for long. After a certain weekend, he didn't turn up for class for 3 odd days. Eventually, an announcement was made by our principal of his demise. They obviously didn't mention the way he went. It was later that the details filtered in, and we came to know that while his parents had gone out for a few hours one day, he consumed rat poison that he had stolen and kept hidden. He was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. Rest in peace, my friend. I was riding in the back of a pickup truck that was driving down an irrigation canal. The truck slipped and rolled into the canal. A classmate was pinned and he drowned. All those people who say things like, "We did an unsafe thing when we were kids and we were fine." Yeah, because you're the survivors. The dead kids don't post on Facebook. Another kid had Duchenne's MD, and he died from that. Also, I'm in my 50s, so they're kind of starting to drop like flies, but I assume you mean the ones who actually died while we were still in school. A classmate got run over. It was an accident and killed by a school bus when we were in elementary school. His sister was a good friend of mine. The bus driver was a neighbor. She overdosed a year later because of the guilt. It was horrible. The kid didn't show up to school one day. We heard she was home sick. The next day we found out he was dead. Bacterial meningitis. The whole thing was surreal. Abe was 17. His dad died unexpectedly, and his mom gave him his dad's Corvette. About a month later, he disappeared one day along with the Corvette after he left a party. Everyone looked to him, but no one could find him. 2 years later, some kids were seeing who could swim the deepest in the popular neighborhood swimming hole canal. This was South Florida, and one kid's hand touched the roof of a Corvette. A classmate died from appendicitis. She had a stomachache for days, and her mom thought it was normal. It was too late when they went to the hospital. She died on her way there. Our school had us all bring flowers to her grave. Poor kid. I sometimes think of her and how her mom didn't take her seriously. She thought maybe the food made her sick. It will pass. Just take some Pepto-Bismol. It was so fast, sadly. 16 years old, back around 1996. I was driving and had one of those CD wallets in the top visor. A CD fell onto the floor. He pulled over to the side of the road and stopped. Leaned down to pick it up. He did everything right. And an old lady not paying attention hit his car with hers. Fall 2002. One of the most popular girls in my senior high school class died from a brain aneurysm. She was one of those popular girls who was still nice to everyone. In fact, she was one of the first people who was ever nice to me in middle school after I moved here, when I really needed someone to be nice to me. It was a very sad time for everyone at the school, especially the senior class. On the plus side, it brought all of us together and really united the whole senior class. All the small beefs and rivalries and bullying just kind of went away. It made for a very peaceful school year, as she died right at the beginning of the year. She was also an organ donor, so her organs went on to save or help a whole lot of people. Anytime I have to go to the BMV, I see posters with her picture and her story about how being an organ donor saves lives, and it's always bittersweet. Here we are, almost 22 years later, and it still chokes me up to think about it. Rest in peace, Lindsay. Lindsay sounds like an awesome girl. It's a tragedy. Anyone dying young is a tragedy, whatever the reason. It's a sad topic for sure, so hang in there, everybody. It gets better. Their kid brother took out their father's gun and shot them in the face. Why the gun was loaded and wasn't more secure, I don't know. It wasn't done maliciously. He was playing. We had been friends for a while but grew apart. My mom wouldn't let me go to the funeral. Actually just found out this year that we were distantly related. She threw me for a loop. It's nearly 40 years since I left school, but he got a scholarship to a college at Oxford. This scholarship was all monetarily, but it's serious cachet. A couple of weeks later, he got his head smashed into a rugby post and died of a brain hemorrhage. My best friend in high school had mental health issues that very few people knew about. I found him one morning on the way to school in the train tracks. I got detention for skipping school when I went back a few days later. This was back in 2005 or 6. One of them got run over by a truck in front of the school, actually gory. Everyone got a week off, and the city promptly installed barriers and speed bumps to enforce the traffic light. One of them died of leukemia. They were missing very often to begin with. We don't know much about them. Another one was murdered alongside his father, who was the school director. The murderer took a while to be found, but was eventually put in jail. And then one also died. Something about school failure and a lack of everything at home due to parents' drink habits. They didn't mention ever being beaten. When I was about 8, the kid who used to bully me at school was hit by a car running across the road right nearby after school one day. He was in the ICU for about 3 days and then died. I didn't wish him harm or anything, but just 2 days earlier, he'd grabbed my collarbone and dragged me around the quad using it as a handle, and it hurt more than anything I'd ever experienced. It still aches a bit when we're told he's dead. They went around a circle, and we all had to say something we missed about him, and when it got to me, I couldn't think of anything nice to say. I just said, "He used to bully me, but I'm sad that he's dead," or something like that. The whole class looked at me like I was an effing monster. Really stuck with me at that age, thinking how bad of a person I was for not being more sad. He hung himself on the balcony of their house. I was told it was the grandma who found him. We were hanging out just a few weeks before, and his best friend was saying they were talking about plans for life after college just the day prior. It took everyone by complete surprise. He left a note, but I didn't know exactly what was in it. I was only told that it had to do a lot with depression and family, amongst other things. Besides his folks, he left behind a little sister who felt absolutely lost and was trying to make sense of it, but couldn't. His girlfriend was distraught too. Her eulogies really broke me. He was a fun, generous soul, the kind who'd be friends with you whether you're popular or literally invisible. We weren't super tight, but I would rather call him a good friend. He's still sorely missed. Not dead, but severely messed up to an early death. Happened in the U.S. to a Canadian classmate. Father and son were driving back from Florida on the highway somewhere in North Carolina. Two crackheads dropped a boulder from an overpass, causing severe damage to the boy. This was back in the 90s. Sad stuff. A friend of mine from elementary school got a heart transplant, and her body rejected the heart. I was friends with her while she was sick, and would make cards for her when she couldn't hold them. Another friend's mom pulled her daughter and me out of school to attend the memorial service. I'm not sure if it's because I was so young and I expected it, or if it would have always turned out this way, but I cannot attend memorial services, funerals, viewings, or anything like that without having a severe anxiety reaction. The same year, I was visiting my grandparents and classes were talking, and a classmate's name flashed across the screen on the news. They tried to get me distracted, but I kept asking why she was on TV. Her mother's car had gone into a lake, and her mother, a classmate, and her little brother had all drowned. I've had suspicions that it was a murder or suicide on the mother. but I've never had it in me to do any more research about that matter. He was a PhD student in the same department, but in a different program than mine. He killed himself 2 months into our first semester of graduate school. He had been very quiet and a little awkward for the first few weeks. I could relate. All the first-year students took overlapping courses, so we had several courses together. Students in my cohort and program were particularly cruel. They mocked me, and I could hear them gossiping about me in the shared space when I would walk through the halls. They did the same thing to him. He grew quieter. He would come into class, put his head down on the desk, and not talk to anyone. My friends tried to get him to come out with us, but he always politely declined. One week, he didn't come to class at all. I told my friends that he finally did it. He killed himself. A few days later, we got an email from the department chair saying that we had hid evidence. And we got an email from the department chair saying that he died, but not how. I knew in my heart that it was suicide. The people who bullied him pretended to be shocked. Fast forward several years, and I'm now working with law enforcement, but not as a cop. I asked someone to run his name in their system so I could finally know if that actually happened to him or not. Yes, he killed himself, and he had left a note in his apartment mailbox asking someone to check in his apartment, and he even had an apologize for the inconvenience. It broke my heart. I cried for him and his loneliness. I wish I had been harder to a friend. The students who were so cruel to him didn't know what I know. Wish they did. Wish they felt that shame that people should. They've all moved on, started families, and are viewed as accomplished, good people. I'll never forget them laughing at him, and the look on his face, though. Sometimes I remember you, Eric. Just weeks after we all graduated, a few students who were in my class but I never talked to were found dead in a home. The cover story was that it was drug-related gun wounds, but I know some people who live down there, the streets from where it happened, and they said they were so mangled they could not even be identified by gender at first. I've always wanted to know what actually happened. It was so heartbreaking, and my graduating class still posts about them on their birthdays, even though it has been 6 years. I had two, actually. It was almost 4. One, my best friend in junior high. We were class clowns together in the 8th grade. I went to a different school for my freshman year, and my family moved states in the summer between 9 and 10. I tried to keep in touch to no avail, but he didn't hardly ever text back or use his social media, which I later found out was due to his abusive home life. I found out through friends on Facebook about 6 months after the move that he'd gotten into a fight with his dad, went out to his backyard and hanged himself. The first person I met at the new church we started going to after the move. Cool guy at first. We were never really friends, just friendly. He started hanging out with a bad crowd in 11th grade, and his whole attitude started changing. He quit coming to church, he got mean, etc. It turns out he'd found the way into a drug habit. He overdosed in the 12th grade. 3. Another guy I was friendly with after the move, tall, lanky JROTC kid. One of those two I knew made JROTC their whole personality, to the point that it was kind of funny to see. One afternoon, he broke into the rifle range after school and tried to shoot himself. He messed up his attempt and survived. He was a year younger than me, so I know he was still around when I graduated. I have sisters, 2 years my junior, and they never said anything about anything else dramatic happening like that. So I'd assume he either graduated without incident or he moved. 4. I met a cute little quiet girl in my English class after the move. She was the sweetest girl I've ever met. Terrible home life. She was covered in scars. Most of them were self-inflicted. Of course, my dumbass goes, "Can fix her." It turns out I could not. We dated through her senior year of high school and part of her freshman year in college. When the emotional stress of handling freshman year at college and her mental illness became too much for me to handle, I broke up with her. She tried to overdose on Tylenol a while later. ER doctor saved her, and now she's deathly allergic to Tylenol. To make a very long story short, after several years of bad relationships and poor mental health, she can finally get clean, dropped all of her toxic contacts, and got in touch with me to let me know. We're married now. I'm 32 now, but when I was 16, a 15-year-old classmate died. Not a best friend, but definitely a friend. Sat next to me in one class. He just felt sick, so he went home. I went to sleep that night and never woke up. There are some random anomalies as far as I know. I had already lost my dad due to suicide, veteran with issues, when I was 14, so I was not as shocked by this death as most classmates, but something did stay with me forever about him. I was a drinker, a smoker, and not physically active at the time, just partying. He didn't smoke, didn't drink, and was physically really active. It really didn't feel fair. I felt if someone in the class had to die, it should be me, not him. Anyway, the death made me appreciate a lot more. I kind of like any day could be the last. I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie now. Some would call me insane sometimes. I just feel alive.